The door slammed so hard the glass rattled, and the room froze around the sound.
Say that again. Say it slowly so I don't mishear you. Speak.
There was a pause on the other end, the kind that made his jaw tighten. Then a woman's voice, nervous and rushed.
Mr. Kang, this is Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about Zuri Adeyemi. She listed you as her emergency contact.
Dae-sung's entire body went rigid. That name. He hadn't heard it in 8 months, not since the day she walked out of his life with nothing but a suitcase and eyes that refused to meet him. The divorce papers had been signed in silence, her lawyer doing all the talking while she sat there like a ghost of the woman he'd married. What happened? His voice was ice. Sir, Ms. Adeyemi gave birth approximately 3 hours ago. There were complications during delivery, but both mother and baby are stable now. The baby, a boy, is healthy. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. The world stopped. Baby. Boy. His fingers tightened around the phone until he heard the casing crack. What did you just say? Your son, sir. Miss Adeyemi gave birth to your son. She's in recovery now, but she's been asking for you. Dae-sung ended the call without another word. He sat there in the darkness, his mind a hurricane of calculations and rage. A son. Zuri had a son. His son. The timeline crashed through his thoughts like broken glass. 8 months since the divorce, 9 months of pregnancy. She knew when she left him. He stood abruptly, his movements sharp and controlled despite the chaos tearing through his chest. Within minutes, he was dressed in all black, his leather jacket concealing the gun he always carried. His driver, Min-jae, was already waiting outside when he stepped into the elevator, because Min-jae knew better than to be late when Dae-sung moved with that particular kind of silence. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows of his Mercedes as they cut through Seoul's empty streets. Dae-sung's mind was a weapon, dissecting every moment of his last year with Zuri, searching for the clue he'd missed. She'd been distant those final months. Yes. She'd stopped attending his business dinners, stopped asking about his day, stopped reaching for him in bed. He thought she was finally breaking under the weight of his world. He thought she was weak. He'd been wrong. Stopped. His presence parting the late-night crowd like Moses splitting the sea. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw him, recognition flashing across her face. Everyone in Seoul knew Kang Da-sung. Everyone knew what he was. Room 504, she stammered before he could speak. He took the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. Each flight brought him closer to answers, closer to her, closer to a truth that had the potential to destroy everything he'd built. By the time he reached the 5th floor, his heart was pounding not from exertion but from something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. The hallway was quiet, punctuated only by the beeping of machines and the soft murmur of nurses at their station. Room 504 sat at the end, the door slightly ajar. Dae-sung paused outside, his hand resting on the frame as he looked through the gap. Zuri was there, sitting up in bed, her dark skin glowing under the harsh hospital lights. Her natural hair, which she'd always worn in elaborate styles during their marriage, was pulled back into a simple wrap. She looked tired, thinner than he remembered, but there was something different in her eyes, something stronger. In her arms, wrapped in a blue blanket, was a tiny bundle that occasionally squirmed. His son. Dae-sung pushed the door open. The hinges creaked softly and Zuri's head snapped up. Their eyes met, and for a moment the universe held its breath. "Hello, Dae-sung," she said quietly, her voice carrying none of the warmth it once had. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. "When were you planning to tell me?" "I wasn't." The honesty of it hit him like a physical blow. No apology, no explanation, just 2 words that confirmed his worst suspicion. He moved closer to the bed, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's my child." It wasn't a question. "Yes. You divorced me, disappeared, and spent 8 months carrying my son without saying a word." His voice was dangerously soft now, the kind of tone that made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit. "Explain that to me, Zuri." Make me understand why you would do something so monumentally stupid. Her grip tightened on the baby, protective instinct flaring in her eyes. Because your world kills everything it touches. I wasn't going to let it kill him, too. My world? Daesung's laugh was bitter. You married into my world. You knew exactly what I was. I knew you were powerful. I knew you were dangerous. What I didn't know was that you would choose that power over everything else. Over me. Over any future we might have had. Zuri's voice cracked slightly, but she held her ground. I got pregnant 2 weeks before I asked for the divorce. When I found out, I had a choice. Stay and watch you turn our child into another piece on your chessboard, or leave and give him a chance at something better. Daesung's jaw clenched so hard he tasted blood. You had no right to make that choice alone. I had every right. I carried him. I risked my life bringing him into this world. And I'll be damned if I let you drag him into the same darkness that swallowed you. The baby stirred then, letting out a small cry that shattered the tension like dropped crystal. Zuri immediately shifted, rocking him gently and murmuring soft words in Igbo, her mother tongue. Daesung watched, transfixed, as his son's tiny fist emerged from the blanket, fingers spreading and closing as if grasping for something invisible. What did you name him? The question escaped before he could stop it. Zuri hesitated, then met his eyes with defiance. Kelechi. It means thank God. No Korean name. No. Something dark and possessive unfurled in Daesung's chest. This child, this boy who carried his blood, had been claimed entirely by her. No part of him had been left for the father. It was an insult. It was a war. It was unforgivable. And yet, as he stared at Kelechi's small face, something else stirred beneath the rage, something he didn't have a name for. I want a paternity test. Zuri's eyes flashed. Get out. I have a right to know for certain. You have no rights here, Daesung. I didn't put your name on the birth certificate. Legally, you're nobody to this child. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout. Now get the hell out of my room before I call security. He should have felt fury. He should have unleashed the full weight of his power and resources to crush her defiance. But instead, Daesung found himself memorizing the scene before him, burning it into his memory with an intensity that frightened him. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. The drive back to his penthouse was a blur. Daesung sat in the back seat, his phone in his hand, watching the city lights reflect off its black screen. One call, that's all it would take. One call to his lawyers, one call to the judges he owned, one call to make Zuri's life a living nightmare until she handed over his son. But he didn't make the call. Instead, he opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't touched in months. Park Ji-won. His most trusted informant, the man who could find anyone, uncover anything, disappear problems like they'd never existed. Find out everything, Daesung said when Ji-won answered. Where she's been, who she's been with, every doctor's appointment, every friend, every place she spent more than 5 minutes. I want to know what she ate for breakfast and what she dreamed about at night. Understood, boss. How far back? From the day the divorce was finalized. No, before that. Start from 3 months before she filed. He ended the call and leaned back, closing his eyes. Somewhere in this city, Zuri was probably feeding their son, rocking him to sleep, building a life that didn't include him. The thought burned. But what burned more was the question that kept circling his mind like a vulture. If the child is mine, why didn't she tell me? 3 days later, Ji-won delivered his report in person. They met at one of Daesung's legitimate businesses, a high-end restaurant that served as a front for less savory operations. The lunch rush was over, and the private room in the back provided the privacy necessary for sensitive conversations. Ji-won spread the documents across the table with practiced efficiency. Bank statements, medical records, surveillance photos, witness testimonies. The entire architecture of Zuri's last 10 months laid bare. She left Seoul the day after the divorce. Ji-won began, pointing to a train ticket receipt. Went to Busan first. Stayed with a friend from university. Adayola Obi, Nigerian, works as a translator. She stayed there 2 months before the friend helped her find an apartment in a quieter district. Dae Sung studied a photo of Zuri entering a modest building, her belly barely showing under a loose dress. The timestamp was read 4 months ago. She worked remotely as an English tutor, kept a low profile, no social media activity, no credit card usage that could be traced easily. She paid everything in cash. Ji-won slid over another document. Here's where it gets interesting. She went to the same clinic every 2 weeks, prenatal checkups. The doctor's name is Kim Soo-jin and specializes in high-risk pregnancies. High risk? Dae-sung's head snapped up. Zuri had complications early on, placenta previa. It means the placenta was covering the cervix, causing bleeding. Could have killed both her and the baby if not monitored. Carefully. Ji-won's expression was unreadable. According to the medical records, she was advised to stay on bed rest for the last 3 months. She didn't. She kept working, kept moving, kept hiding. The words landed like stones in Dae-sung's gut. She'd been in danger. Alone. While he'd been consolidating power and eliminating rivals, she'd been fighting for her life and their child's life in silence. Why didn't the hospital contact me sooner? His voice was dangerous now. She didn't list you as the father until she went into labor. The nurses said she was hemorrhaging badly, though she might not make it. That's when she finally wrote your name down. Dae-sung's hands curled into fists on the table. Keep going. There's more. 2 months ago, someone else started looking for her. Ji-won produced a series of grainy surveillance photos showing a man in a dark coat watching Zuri's apartment building. This is Han Sung-ho, works for the Jade Tiger Syndicate. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The Jade Tigers were Dae-sung's oldest rivals, a Chinese-Korean operation that had been trying to expand into his territory for years. The current peace between them was fragile at best, maintained only through mutually assured destruction. Why would they be watching my ex-wife? That's the question, isn't it? Ji-won leaned back, his expression grim. I pulled some strings, called in favors. Turns out there's been chatter in the underworld. Rumors that you have a weakness now. A child. Ice flooded Dae-sung's veins. How? Someone in your organization talked. I haven't identified who yet, but the leak came from inside. Someone knew about Zuri's pregnancy before you did. The implications crashed through Dae-sung's mind like dominoes. A traitor in his ranks. His enemies knew about his son before he did. Zuri and Kalechi were exposed, vulnerable, and hunted. Where is she now? His voice was deadly calm. Still at the hospital. They're keeping her for observation because of the bleeding. She's scheduled to be discharged tomorrow morning. Put a team on her, 24-hour surveillance. I want to know if anyone looks at her wrong. Boss, if we put obvious protection on her, it'll confirm the rumors. It'll paint a target on her back bigger than... I don't care. Dae-sung stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Do it, and find the leak. I want a name by tomorrow. Ji-won nodded and gathered his documents. What about Zuri? Does she know she's being watched? No, and she won't. She's made it clear she wants nothing to do with me. Fine, she doesn't have to know I'm protecting her. After Ji-won left, Dae-sung remained in the private room, staring at the photo of Zuri entering her apartment building. In the image, her hand rested on her pregnant belly. Her face turned slightly toward the camera. She looked tired but determined, like a soldier preparing for a battle she knew she might not win. She'd chosen to face that battle alone, rather than turn to him. The realization cut deeper than any knife. His phone buzzed, a message from Min-jae. They're moving her to a private recovery facility. Thought you should know. Da-sung was in his car before he consciously decided to move. The recovery facility was in Gangnam, discreet and expensive. The kind of place where celebrities and businessmen sent mistresses and illegitimate children to avoid scandal. Dae-sung's Mercedes pulled up to the underground garage entrance just as an ambulance was leaving. Through the tinted windows, he caught a glimpse of Zuri's face, pale but awake, and the small bundle in her arms. He followed at a distance, watching as they transferred her to a private room on the 3rd floor. His men were already in position, disguised as maintenance workers and visitors, creating an invisible net of protection around her. She would never know they were there. That was the point. Dae-sung parked across the street and waited. Hours passed. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Nurses came and went. A doctor stopped by for evening rounds. Normal, safe, boring. Then, at 9:47 p.m., everything changed. A black van pulled up to the side entrance, parking in a zone clearly marked for emergency vehicles only. 4 men emerged, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that came from military training or syndicate work. They were dressed as EMTs, but Dae-sung recognized the bulge of weapons under their jackets. His phone was in his ear before they reached the door. "Ji-won, we have a situation." The men entered through the side door, bypassing security with an access card that shouldn't have worked. Dae-sung was already moving, his hand on his gun, his mind calculating angles and outcomes. He sent a rapid text to his men inside. "3rd floor, now." The elevator was too slow. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to panic. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, his men were already engaged. The sound of silenced gunfire punctuated the sterile silence of the hallway, followed by the heavy thuds of bodies hitting the floor. Dae-sung rounded the corner to see his head of security, Kwon, standing over 2 unconscious men, while 2 others were being restrained against the wall. Zuri's door was still closed, undisturbed. "Status?" Dae-sung demanded. "Intercepted them before they reached the room. She doesn't know anything happened." "Interrogate them. I want to know who sent them and what they know." Kwon nodded and began dragging the men toward the service elevator. Dae-sung stood in the hallway, staring at Zuri's closed door, fighting the urge to burst inside and... What? Explain that her worst fears were justified? That his world had already found her, already tried to take his son? He turned and walked away before he could do something stupid. The interrogation took place in one of Dae-sung's warehouses on the outskirts of Seoul. The men from the hospital were zip-tied to chairs under harsh fluorescent lights, blood already dripping from split lips and broken noses. Dae-sung stood in the shadows, watching as Kwon worked them over with methodical brutality. "Who sent you?" Kwon's voice was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. The first man spit blood onto the concrete floor. "Go to hell!" Kwon smiled and broke his finger. The scream echoed off the metal walls. Dae-sung remained still, his face expressionless. This was his world, the world Zuri had fled from, the world she'd been right to fear. "Let's try again," Kwon said pleasantly. "Who sent you?" "The Tigers," the second man gasped out, his eyes wide with pain. "Boss Chen gave the order, said there's a bounty on the kid. Whoever delivers him alive gets $500,000. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop. Dae-sung stepped forward into the light, and both men went pale. "Chen Min-jun put a hit on my infant son." His voice was so calm, it was almost a whisper. The second man nodded frantically. "It's not just us, man. Half the underworld knows about it. They're saying you've gone soft, that you can't protect your own blood. Chen wants to prove it. He takes your kid. He proves you're weak. He takes your territory." Dae-sung looked at Kwon. "How many people know the bounty details?" "Too many to silence quietly," Kwon admitted. "Word's already spread through the night markets and gambling dens. By tomorrow, every 2-bit criminal in Seoul will be looking for that baby." The implications were staggering. Zuri couldn't go home. She couldn't go anywhere, in public. The moment she walked out of that facility with Kalechi, they'd be hunted, and she had no idea. Dae-sung pulled out his phone and made a call he never thought he'd make. "Attorney Lee, this is Kang Dae-sung. I need emergency custody papers drawn up. Tonight. Yes, I'm aware of the time. I don't care. I want full legal guardianship of the child and protection orders in place by morning. Spare no expense." He hung up and turned back to the men tied to the chairs. "Tell me everything Chen is planning, every detail, every contact, every safe house, and then pray I'm feeling merciful enough to let you live." By dawn, Dae-sung had a complete picture of the threat. Chen had mobilized at least 20 teams across Seoul and Busan. He'd offered bounties ranging from $500,000 to a full million for the baby, depending on whether the mother survived the extraction. It was a coordinated assault designed to obliterate any sense of safety Dae-sung might have. It was a war. Attorney Lee arrived at the warehouse with the emergency custody papers at 6 a.m., his hands shaking slightly as he handed over the documents. These will hold up in court, but you'll need the mother's cooperation eventually. A judge will want to see that she's not being coerced. She'll cooperate, Daesung said with certainty he didn't feel. There's another issue. If she contests this, if she claims you're a danger to the child, the courts will investigate. Your business associations will be scrutinized. Daesung's smile was cold. Then I'll make sure she doesn't contest it. The recovery facility was waking up when he arrived. Morning nurses made their rounds, delivering medications and breakfast trays. Daesung walked through the front entrance this time, no longer hiding. The receptionist tried to stop him, but one look at his face was enough to make her fall silent. He knocked on Zuri's door once, then entered without waiting for permission. She was sitting in bed, Kelechi cradled against her chest while she tried to eat a bowl of porridge one-handed. Her head jerked up when she saw him, surprise quickly morphing into anger. I told you to stay away. Last night, 4 men tried to kidnap our son. Daesung's voice was flat, factual. They were working for the Jade Tiger Syndicate under orders from Chen Minjun. There's a bounty on Kelechi's head. 500,000 won, possibly more. Every criminal in Seoul knows about it by now. The color drained from Zuri's face. The bowl of porridge slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the bedside table. You're lying. I wish I was. He pulled out his phone and showed her photos from the hallway last night, images of the men being subdued by his security team. This is what your independence looks like, Zuri. This is what happens when you try to hide from my world instead of letting me protect you from it. Oh, God. Her arms tightened around Kelechi, her whole body beginning to shake. Oh, God, oh, God. Listen to me. Daesung moved closer, his voice urgent. You have 2 choices. You can keep insisting you don't need me, pack up your baby, and walk out of here into a city full of people who want to steal him. Or you can accept reality and let me do what I should have been doing all along. What reality? Tears were streaming down her face now. That you were right, that I can't survive without you? No. The reality that this isn't about us anymore. This is about Kelechi, about keeping him alive long enough to grow up. He crouched down beside the bed so they were eye level. I won't apologize for what I am, Zuri, but I will tear apart anyone who tries to hurt our son. Let me do that. Let me keep you both safe. She stared at him, her eyes searching his face for something, though he didn't know what. Lies, maybe, or truth. Perhaps she didn't know which one frightened her more. What are you proposing? Her voice was barely a whisper. I have a private compound outside Seoul. 24-hour security, medical staff on site, everything you and Kelechi need. You'll stay there until I've eliminated the threat. And how long will that take? As long as it takes. Zuri closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't live in a cage again, Daesung. That's what our marriage was. A beautiful, suffocating cage. Then think of it as a sanctuary instead. A place where Kelechi can be safe while I handle the monsters. He stood, pulling the custody papers from his jacket. I've also filed for emergency guardianship. If something happens to you, I'll have legal authority to protect him. Her eyes flew open, rage igniting through the fear. You did what? I did what was necessary. Sign them or don't. But you're coming with me either way. Because the moment you walk out that door without my protection, you're both dead. It was brutal. It was controlling. It was everything she'd left him to escape. It was also true. Zuri looked down at Kelechi, who was sleeping peacefully against her chest, completely unaware that his existence had painted targets on both their backs. When she looked back up at Daesung, something in her expression had changed. Not acceptance, but resignation. I want your promise, she said softly. Promise me that when this is over, when the threats are gone, you'll let us go. You'll give us the freedom to live our lives without you dictating every move. Daesung's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to claim what was his and never let go. But he saw the steel in her eyes, the same steel that had allowed her to survive 9 months alone while carrying his child. "I promise," he lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. Maybe it was a hope that he could somehow become the kind of man who could keep that promise. They left the facility an hour later, surrounded by a convoy of 3 armored vehicles. Daesung's men formed a human shield as they transferred Zuri and Kelechi into the middle car, their movements practiced and efficient. Zuri held her son close, her eyes darting to every shadow, every parked car, every person on the street. The compound was an hour outside Seoul, nestled in the mountains where the air was clean and the nearest neighbor was miles away. It had been Daesung's grandfather's estate, converted into a fortress after the old man died. 12-foot walls topped with cameras and motion sensors, guard towers at each corner, a staff of 50, all vetted and loyal. Zuri said nothing as they drove through the gates. She was silent as they led her to the east wing, where a suite of rooms had been prepared with everything a new mother might need. Medical equipment, a nursery, soft lighting and comfortable furniture, a cage disguised as a sanctuary. "I'll leave you to rest," Daesung said after the staff finished explaining where everything was. "If you need anything, press the call button. Someone will respond immediately." "Wait." Zuri's voice stopped him at the door. "What are you going to do?" "To Chen, I mean." He looked back at her, standing in the middle of the room with Kelechi in her arms, looking small and fragile despite the strength he knew she possessed. "What I always do when someone threatens what's mine," he said simply. "I'll destroy him." Then he walked out, closing the door softly behind him. The War Council convened in Daesung's office 2 hours later. Kwon, Ji-won, and 5 of his territory lieutenants gathered around the conference table, their faces grim. A map of Seoul was spread across the surface, marked with red pins indicating Jade Tiger locations, and blue pins showing Daesung's assets. "Chen has made his move," Daesung began without preamble. "He's declared open season on my family, which means he's declared war on all of us. This isn't just about territory anymore, this is personal." "What's the play, boss?" Kwon leaned forward. "Do we hit their gambling operations? Take out their street dealers?" "No, we go for the head." Daesung pointed to a red pin in Gangnam. "Chen's main headquarters is here, in the nightclub district. He thinks he's untouchable because he's kept things quiet, operated in the shadows. He's about to learn he's wrong." Ji-won frowned. "A direct assault will trigger retaliation. The other families will get nervous, thinking you're getting too aggressive." "Let them be nervous. Let them all see what happens when someone comes after my son." Daesung's voice was ice and fire. "I want every piece of leverage we have on Chen activated, every debt he owes called in, every dirty secret is exposed. By the time I'm done with him, he'll have nothing left but the clothes on his back." "And if he retaliates against your family?" one of the lieutenants asked carefully. "He can't. They're behind walls he'll never breach, but make sure our own houses are secure. Check in on your wives, your children, your parents. Chen's desperate enough to strike anywhere, and I won't have collateral damage on my conscience." The meeting lasted another hour, plans being refined and resources allocated. By the end, every man in the room understood their role in the coming storm. They filed out quietly, leaving Daesung alone with his thoughts and his rage. His phone buzzed, a message from the compound's head of security. "Package secure, no incidents." Package. They were calling his son a package. Daesung closed his eyes and allowed himself one moment of weakness, one moment to acknowledge the fear that had been clawing at his chest since that phone call 3 nights ago. He'd built an empire through violence and cunning, had faced down rivals and traitors without flinching, but the thought of losing Kelechi, a child he'd known about for less than a week, terrified him more than any bullet ever had. The attack came faster than expected. Chen didn't wait for Daesung to make the first move. 2 days after Zuri and Kelechi arrived at the compound, 3 of Daesung's legitimate businesses were firebombed. A restaurant, a nightclub, an import-export warehouse. Millions in damage, no casualties, but the message was clear. Chen was escalating. The retaliation was swift and brutal. Daesung's men hit Chen's drug distribution network in the early morning hours, seizing shipments worth tens of millions. They raided his gambling dens, shutting down operations and scattering customers. They leaked information to the police about Chen's human trafficking operations, triggering investigations that would tie up his resources for months. Within 48 hours, Chen had lost a third of his revenue streams. The response came in the form of a video. Dai Sung was reviewing security footage from the compound when Ji-won burst into his office, phone in hand. "Boss, you need to see this." The video showed a man tied to a chair in a dark room, his face swollen and bloody. One of Dae Sung's mid-level distributors, a man named Park, who ran numbers in Itaewon. Chen himself stood beside him, immaculate in a white suit that somehow made him look more monstrous. "Kang Dae Sung," Chen's voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "You've been making a lot of noise lately, disrupting my business, costing me money. I thought we had an understanding, but apparently I was wrong." Chen pulled out a knife, the blade glinting under the harsh lighting. "So here's a new understanding. Every day you continue this campaign, I take one of yours. And when I run out of your people, I'll start looking at that compound you've got up in the mountains. I'll find a way in. I always do." The knife moved. Park screamed. The video ended. Dae Sung stared at the blank screen, his expression unreadable. Then, very calmly, he said, "Find Park. If he's still alive, extract him. If he's not, find the body and give it to his family." "Boss, Chen's not playing games anymore. He knows where the compound is. So do half the people in Seoul's underworld. The difference is none of them are stupid enough to actually try breaching it." Dae Sung stood, buttoning his jacket. "But just in case, double the security detail. I want drones in the air 24/7 and thermal sensors on every inch of the perimeter." "What about Chen?" "Schedule a meeting, neutral ground, let him think I'm willing to negotiate." Ji-won's eyes widened. "You're going to, yes." The meeting was set for 3 days later in an abandoned factory on the edge of Seoul's industrial district. Neutral ground meant each side could bring 5 men, no more, and everyone would be searched for weapons at the door. It was a farce, of course. Everyone would be armed regardless. But the ritual had to be observed. Dae Sung spent those 3 days at the compound with Zuri and Kalechi. He didn't plan it that way. He'd intended to stay in the city, coordinating operations and finalizing plans. But on the second night, he received a call from the compound's medical staff. Zuri was running a fever, possible post-delivery infection. They were monitoring it closely, but thought he should know. He was there within the hour. The suite was dim when he entered, lit only by a small lamp in the corner. Zuri was in bed, her face flushed and damp with sweat. The medical staff had set up an IV to keep her hydrated, the clear tube running from her arm to a bag hanging beside the bed. In the nursery beyond, he could hear Kalechi fussing softly. "He's hungry," Zuri whispered when she saw him. "I tried to feed him, but I can't. I'm too weak." "The nurses can prepare a bottle." "No, he needs to nurse. Bonding, antibodies, all of it. But I can't hold him steady enough." Dae Sung stood there, uncertain in a way he hadn't been since childhood. Then he moved to the nursery, where Kalechi was working himself up to a proper cry, his tiny face red with infant indignation. Carefully, so carefully, Dae Sung lifted his son for the first time. The baby was so small, impossibly small. His entire body fit in Dae Sung's forearms, light as breath, fragile as glass. Kalechi's eyes, dark and unfocused, seemed to look right through him, seeing something beyond the man who held him. "Hello," Dae Sung said softly. "I'm your father." Kalechi responded by screaming louder. "Bring him here," Zuri called weakly. Dae Sung carried his son back to the bedroom, moving with the kind of caution usually reserved for carrying explosives. Zuri had managed to prop herself up against the pillows, and she guided him through the awkward process of positioning Kalechi for feeding. His small hands clutched at her, desperate and trusting, and Dae Sung felt something crack in his chest. "Stay," Zuri said quietly, "until he's done. In case She didn't finish, but Dae Sung understood. In case she passed out from the fever, in case she couldn't hold their son safely. So he stayed. He pulled a chair close to the bed and watched as Kalechi nursed, his tiny body relaxing as he fed. Zuri's eyes kept drifting closed, but she forced them open again and again. Maternal instinct stronger than exhaustion. The only sounds in the room were the baby's soft suckling and the quiet hum of medical equipment. "I'm sorry," Zuri said after a long silence. Dae-sung looked up. "For what?" "For not telling you, for keeping him from you." She adjusted Kalechi slightly, wincing. "I told myself I was protecting him, but maybe I was just punishing you." "Were you wrong?" The question came out harsher than he intended. "About needing to protect him from my world?" Zuri's laugh was bitter. "No. Everything I feared would happen is happening. We're in hiding, people want to steal our baby, you're preparing for war. I was right about all of it." She finally looked at him, her fevered eyes glassy but clear. "But I was wrong to think I could handle it alone. I was wrong to believe I could keep him safe without you. You kept him safe for 9 months." "Barely. Do you know how many times I almost broke down and called you? How many nights do I lay awake wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "I gave birth to your son thinking I might die. And all I could think about was that if I did, you'd never know he existed. That he'd grow up without either parent because I was too proud to admit I needed help." Kalichi had finished nursing and was falling asleep against her chest, his small mouth still moving in unconscious mimicry. Dae-sung reached out and took him again, this time with slightly more confidence. He stood and carried his son to the nursery, laying him gently in the crib and covering him with a soft blanket. When he returned, Zuri had slumped back against the pillows, her eyes closed. He checked her pulse, steady but rapid, then adjusted the IV drip according to the instructions the medical staff had left. He should call them and let them know her fever was still high. But he didn't. Instead, he sat back down in the chair and watched her sleep. In the soft lamplight, with her defenses down and her face relaxed, Zuri looked like the woman he'd married. The woman who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and challenged his assumptions and made him believe, for a brief moment, that he could be more than the sum of his violence. He'd loved her. Terribly, possessively, inadequately. And he'd lost her because he hadn't known how to be both the man she needed and the monster his empire required. But maybe he didn't have to choose anymore. Maybe protecting his family was the same thing as protecting his empire. Maybe, for once, the monster and the man wanted the same thing. His phone buzzed. A message from Kwan. "Chen's agreed to the meeting. Friday at midnight." Dae-sung typed back. "Confirmed." 2 days. He had 2 days to make sure that when he walked into that factory, he walked out as the only man standing. The fever broke the next morning. Zuri woke to find Dae-sung asleep in the chair beside her bed, still in his suit from the previous night, his head tilted at an angle that would definitely cause neck pain. On the nightstand, someone had left a fresh water pitcher and a tray of bland foods appropriate for recovery. She drank the entire pitcher. The movement woke him. Dae-sung's eyes opened instantly, alert and focused, despite having clearly gotten no real rest. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a truck, but better." She gestured to the IV. "Can this come out?" "The staff will check you first. If your fever's gone and blood work looks good, yes." He stood, rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness. "I'll call them." "Wait." Zuri caught his hand, surprising both of them. "Thank you for staying." His fingers tightened around hers briefly before he pulled away. "I told you I'd protect you both. That includes making sure you don't die from an infection." "That's not what I meant." "I know." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I have business to handle in the city. I'll be gone for a few days. The security team knows to contact me immediately if anything changes." "What kind of business?" "The kind that ends with Chen Min-jun no longer being a problem." Fear flashed across her face. "Dae-sung!" "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't ask me to be merciful. Don't ask me to find another way. He put a price on our son's head. There is no other way." "I wasn't going to ask you to be merciful," Zuri said quietly. "I was going to tell you to be careful, because Kalechi needs his father to come back alive." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. Then Dae-sung nodded once and walked out. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. Daesung coordinated with his lieutenants, ensuring every angle was covered. Ji-won compiled intelligence on Chen's movements and habits. Kwon assembled the team that would accompany Daesung to the meeting, men he trusted to follow orders without hesitation. But Daesung also made other arrangements, quieter ones. He met with his attorney and updated his will, ensuring that if something happened to him, Zuri would have access to legitimate business assets that could support her and Kalechi. He recorded a message to be delivered only in the event of his death, explaining to his son who he was and why he did what he did. He transferred ownership of the compound to Zuri's name, making sure she'd always have a place that was truly hers. He prepared for the possibility that he might not win. Friday arrived cold and clear, the kind of winter night where breath hung in the air like ghosts. Daesung, dressed in black, as always, checked his weapons twice and met his team in the underground garage. 5 men, all veterans of countless territorial disputes, all willing to die for him if necessary. Remember, he told them as they drove toward the industrial district, this is theater until it isn't. Chen will posture. He'll make threats. Let him. When I give the signal, we move. Not before. What's the signal, boss? One of them asked. Daesung's smile was cold. You'll know it when you see it. The factory was exactly as grim as expected. Rusted metal walls, broken windows, graffiti covering every surface. Chen's vehicles were already there, 3 black SUVs parked in a defensive formation. A man Daesung recognized as one of Chen's lieutenants stood by the entrance, arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. The neutral mediator was there too, an older gangster named Song, who'd been in the game since before both Daesung and Chen were born. He ran the weapon searches with practiced efficiency, confiscating guns, knives, brass knuckles. Everyone went through it, even though everyone knew some weapons would slip through. The Song wasn't there to prevent violence, just to delay it long enough for talking to happen first. The factory floor was vast and empty, their footsteps echoing off concrete. Chen stood in the center, surrounded by his men, looking remarkably calm for someone who'd just lost millions in the past week. He was younger than Daesung, maybe 35, with sharp features and expensive taste in suits. Kang Daesung, Chen said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You actually came. You asked for a meeting. I did. Because I think we've both gotten a bit carried away this past week. Businesses destroyed, people hurt. It's all very dramatic, but ultimately bad for both of us. Chen spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. So I'm proposing a truce. You stay out of my territories, I stay out of yours, and we both go back to making money instead of making corpses. And my son? Ah, yes, the baby. Chen's smile widened. Consider the bounty canceled. I'll spread the word that anyone who touches your family answers to me. Peace offering. It was almost believable. Almost. Why the sudden generosity? Daesung asked. Last I checked, you were threatening to breach my compound. Let's just say I've reconsidered the cost-benefit analysis. Your security is better than I anticipated, and prolonging this war helps neither of us. We're businessmen, Daesung. We can be practical about these things. Daesung studied the other man, reading the micro-expressions that betrayed the lie. The slight tension in Chen's jaw, the way his eyes kept flickering to the shadows at the edge of the factory floor, the too casual stance that suggested readiness to move. This wasn't a peace offering. This was an ambush. You're right, Daesung said slowly. We should be practical. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in rapid Korean. Execute phase 2. Chen's expression shifted from confident to confused. What? The explosion started exactly on schedule. 3 massive booms echoed across the city, visible even from the factory as balls of fire rose into the night sky. Chen's remaining drug warehouses, his offshore accounts being simultaneously drained by Ji-won's hackers, his backup safe houses raided by Daesung's teams. Everything Chen had left disappearing in coordinated strikes. You see, Daesung said conversationally as Chen's face went white, I didn't come here to negotiate. I came here to make sure you understood that when you threaten my family, there is no truce. There is no peace offering. There is only complete and total annihilation. Chen's hand moved toward his jacket. Daesung was faster. The blade he'd hidden in his boot the one Song's cursory search had missed, was in his hand and at Chen's throat before anyone could react. The factory erupted into chaos, men drawing hidden weapons, shouts echoing off the walls. "Stand down!" Daesung's voice cut through the noise. "Or I open his throat right here." Chen's men froze. So did Daesung's. Song, the mediator, had wisely retreated to the shadows, wanting no part of what was about to happen. "You're insane!" Chen gasped, the knife point pressing just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. "No. I'm a father protecting his child. There's a difference." Daesung leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only Chen could hear. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell your men to stand down. You're going to dissolve your entire operation and leave Seoul. You're going to disappear so completely that in a year people will wonder if you ever existed. And in return, I let you live. And if I refuse? Then I kill you right now, and I spend the next month hunting down everyone you've ever cared about. Your mother is in Busan, your sister in Hong Kong, that mistress you keep in the apartment in Gangnam. I will erase your entire bloodline from existence, and the only thing people will remember about Chen Minjun is that he was stupid enough to threaten my son." The silence stretched. Chen's men looked at each other, uncertain. Daesung's team stood ready, hands on concealed weapons. The entire balance of power in Seoul's underworld hung on what happened in the next 30 seconds. "You win," Chen finally said, his voice thick with humiliation and rage. "You win." Daesung removed the knife and stepped back. Chen staggered, his hand going to his throat, checking the minor wound. When he looked at Daesung, his eyes promised future vengeance. But the promises were cheap. Survival was expensive. "Leave," Daesung said. "Now. And if I ever hear your name in this city again, there won't be a conversation. There'll just be a funeral." Chin and his men retreated to their vehicles, and the engines roaring to life and tires, squealing as they fled. Daesung watched them go, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just the cold calculation of a man who'd done what was necessary. "Boss," Quan said quietly, "that was either brilliant or suicidal." "Probably both." Daesung holstered the blade and pulled out his phone. Status report on all operations. The responses came in quickly. All warehouses were destroyed. All digital assets seized or frozen. All of Chen's remaining lieutenants were either arrested or scattered. In one night, Daesung had dismantled an empire that had taken Chen a decade to build. The drive back to the compound was quiet. Dawn was breaking by the time they arrived, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Daesung dismissed his team and walked alone to the East Wing, still wearing the same clothes from the meeting, still carrying the adrenaline that wouldn't quite fade. Zuri was awake, feeding Kalechi in the pre-dawn light. She looked up when he entered, her eyes widening at whatever she saw in his face. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over." She searched his expression for lies, for uncertainty. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Did you—" "He's alive. Exiled, but alive. That's more mercy than he deserved." Kalechi finished nursing, and Zuri shifted him to her shoulder, patting his back gently until he let out a small burp. The domesticity of the scene clashed violently with the violence still humming through Daesung's veins. "You should sleep," Zuri said. "You look exhausted." "I need to debrief with my team. Make sure all the loose ends are—" "Daesung?" Her voice was firm. "Sleep? Everything else can wait a few hours." He wanted to argue. He wanted to maintain the facade of the man who didn't need rest, who could push through anything. But standing there, watching his ex-wife comfort their son in the soft morning light, he felt the weight of the past week crash over him like a wave. "All right," he said quietly. He collapsed on the sofa in the suite's living area, not even bothering to remove his shoes. Sleep claimed him immediately, deep and dreamless. When he woke, it was afternoon. Someone had covered him with a blanket and left water and pain medication on the coffee table. Through the bedroom door, he could hear Zuri humming softly, the same Igbo lullaby her mother used to sing. The melody was unfamiliar, but somehow comforting. Remember, the story isn't end here. This is just the beginning. Only do us a favor, hit the like button, comment the next part. Don't forget to subscribe to this particular channel where the original Afro-Korean romance and drama series drops every week. Turn on the notification bell icon to be the first to notify for the next part. Dropping soon.